And welcome back, fellow football fanatics. This is College Football with Sam. And today has been a pretty poor day for me personally. Don't know why. There isn't really a particular reason why, but something's just been off. But I wanted to, before the night got too old, to give you some previews. So let me just adjust my camera really quickly, and yeah, you'll get to hear me while I do this. There. I think that will be good. Nope, that's a little maybe that. Yes, that'll work. So, how are you guys doing? Let me know in the live chat how all of you are. And we're going to be previewing a ton of Week 13 games. Week 14, we're hoping to be a pretty big week on the channel. So that's the hope. And as you can see on the live show bar down below, our new schedule is Sunday, Monday, Wednesday, and Thursdays when we're going to go live. Next week, we'll try to be live on Thanksgiving since it is in the morning. We'll keep you updated if not. But next week and championship week is what we're trying to lock in as pretty massive weeks for the show. From a viewership angle, from an earned income angle, from a reach angle. We're actually reaching channel highs so far in the month of November on a variety of levels. So that's very encouraging stuff for sure. Make sure before we begin to like, to share, to subscribe, to click that notification bell. Love to hear what you guys have to say. A quick question to go over. If Michigan beats Ohio State and goes to the Big Ten Championship and loses to Indiana, would they still make the playoffs? Asks John Mandock. I think if Michigan beats Ohio State, it's going to be the winner of USC Oregon that reaches the Big Ten Championship game, based on the fact that Michigan is behind those two schools in opponent conference win percentage by about 10 percentage points. If Michigan beats Ohio State, what they're essentially doing is kicking Ohio State out of the Big Ten Championship game and then putting the winner of Oregon USC in for a rematch with Indiana. That is essentially what's going to happen if Michigan beats Ohio State. Just to answer your question, this is discussed on the Cover 3 podcast earlier today. It's what makes the Oregon USC game that much more important for sure. Wow. Black sweater, black background. Hopefully that's not too off-putting to people. I don't think it will be. The white stripes and the subtle color differences help define me from the background. But I think that it's only appropriate to begin this show by talking about my college football playoff predictions and then moving on to the news today that we heard about James Franklin going to Virginia Tech. And we ultimately don't know how that will work out, but I have a take as to how I think it'll work out. Not that I know, we never do, but just some speculation and a little bit of a fun initial read on the situation, an initial off-cuff prediction for that. But first, I want to discuss my Week 13 college football playoff prediction. My top 10 power ratings got a ton of negative feedback. I don't think a lot of people liked that I had Georgia at 1. Maybe it was an overreaction, but I can't overlook that Texas game. And I know they've played in some close games, but let me just come out and say it. I don't think anyone at the top, not even Ohio State and not even Indiana, are so separated from the field that having some close wins here or there is going to deter me from much, honestly. So that's just me. This will get negative reception too, though, based on multiple things. Like, multiple different fan bases will not like this prediction. Just is what it is, though. Why am I freezing? It's been a rough day mentally, but we're going to move on, and we are going to get to this Week 13 playoff prediction. That's what we're going to do. I know a lot of people won't like it, but we're still going to upload it, and we're still going to publish it, and it probably will be wrong. who I think is going to win it all changes pretty week to week here. Ohio State so far has been the most consistent week to week pick as to who's going to win it all, but I don't think that they're far enough ahead from the field to where their spot is going to be invincible, to where they're immortal, because I don't think they're immortal. I think that, they're in Tier 1A. There are a few other teams in there, but only a handful, Georgia included, and then you got Tier 1B, Tier 1C. If you want to hear my explanation for that, watch my top 10 power ratings video. Just watch that, and you'll kind of get my explanation as to why I put the teams where they are. My college football playoff predictions for Week 13 did change significantly from my Week 12 predictions, impacted from Alabama's loss to Oklahoma, a stunning Oklahoma victory on the road, which I think was Brent Venables' best win of his career, outside of maybe 2023 against Texas, and Georgia's drubbing of Texas and Steve Sarkisian, among some other developments. So let's take a look at the college football playoff bracket here. And obviously, 12 total teams participate. The 5 highest ranked conference champions, including a group of 5 champion, is invited, the highest ranked G5 champion. And then you have 4 first round games with 4 home teams, 4 away teams. Then from the quarterfinals onward, games on a neutral field played in New Year's Six bowls. In the first round, seeds 4 through 12, I have James Madison reaching the college football playoff. I know their schedule's very weak, but if they continue to win, I believe that they will get in. At the 11th seed, I have a 10-3 Alabama that wins out in the regular season, but then loses in the SEC championship game. At the 10 seed, I have ACC champion Georgia Tech with an 11-2 record, losing to Georgia, but winning the ACC and winning every other game outside of that Georgia game, and getting in as the 10 seed. You have at 9 a 10-2 Notre Dame, and at 8th a 10-2 Oklahoma. 7 and 6, you have 11-1 SEC teams, Texas A&M, who I think will lose to Texas, and Ole Miss, who I believe wins out. And then at the 5th seed, we have 11-1 Oregon, who I also believe wins out. For the first round buys, mostly conference champions or conference championship game participants, I have Texas Tech occupying the 4th seed and getting the Cotton Bowl, 12-1 record, winning the Big 12. I'm pretty sure I have them beating BYU, but if BYU loses to Cincinnati, that's where things begin to get a little bit tricky, and we'll talk about that in a BYU versus Cincinnati preview and prediction. It'll be BYU or Utah. Pretty unsure. As for the 3rd seed, I have Ohio State winning out, beating Michigan, losing to Indiana in the Big Ten championship game. They'll be awarded with the Orange Bowl. 2nd, I have Georgia winning the SEC, going 12-1, winning out. And for Indiana, well, they just have Purdue left on the schedule. They have a bye. They're off this weekend. Have them upsetting Ohio State in the Big Ten championship game. How I believe this pans out, we'll talk about. But before that, I want to discuss some teams who barely missed and who have an opportunity to bust my playoff predictions. So, Texas at 9-3, if some more chaos occurs, say Alabama loses to Auburn, which I think is more likely than a lot of people believe, they could get left out, enter in 9-3 Texas. James Madison or any of these G5 teams can lose on any given Saturday. So that could be busted. Oregon could lose to one of Washington or USC. That's a tough 2-game stretch. A 10-2 Oregon gets in, but they do not get a home game. Oklahoma, based on style of play, could lose to one of Missouri or LSU. I think due to the head-to-head loss to Texas and power ratings, they'd be kept out. They'd have a lot go their way to get in 9-3. I think a 9-3 Texas gets in over a 9-3 Oklahoma. 9-3 Alabama gets left out. Ohio State, I think they're a lock to get the first round bye, even if Michigan beats them, and therefore they're 11-1 and miss the Big Ten championship game. They have been ranked number 1 for so long, and they beat Texas and they've been dominant and are highly ranked or rated in power ratings. Michigan has a better shot of beating the Buckeyes than a lot of people believe, similar with Auburn over Alabama. The difference is Ohio State's undefeated right now, and Alabama has 2 losses. And Ohio State's number 1 by quite a wide margin. So if they lose to a Michigan team that will either be 8-3 or 9-2, and therefore will win 9 or 10 regular season games if they beat Ohio State, and 10 if they beat Maryland this Saturday, that's not a bad loss. So I don't think they'd be dropped all that far. It would change things, though, because a 10-2 Michigan will get into the playoffs with a win over Ohio State and playing an Oklahoma team that more likely than not is also going to the college football playoff. 10-2 Michigan is more secure than some of these teams we're discussing as teams that just missed. BYU is a team that if they go 11-2, maybe they make it. Utah's ranked high enough to where if they win out at 10-2, even if they miss the Big 12 title game, do they get in as the 11th seed, for example, or the 10 seed? They shouldn't, but maybe they could. And as we get closer to Selection Sunday, my playoff bracket is trying to mirror what I'm seeing the committee rank and seed the playoff bracket based on. So let's get to the quarterfinals. For the quarterfinals, I have Oregon, Oklahoma, Alabama, and Texas A&M winning. These matchups are interesting, not just in the first round outside of JMU versus Oregon, but Oklahoma, Indiana, Oregon, Texas Tech, Alabama, Ohio State, and Texas A&M, Georgia are very intriguing matchups. No one here would be favored by more than a touchdown, if not more than a field goal, over each other. The highest point spreads, I believe, would be Ohio State over Alabama and Indiana over Oklahoma. But Oregon, Texas Tech would be tight. Same thing with Texas A&M and Georgia. But some teams have to lose, some teams have to win. And I think that your teams that have the higher power ratings, my top 4 teams are Georgia, Ohio State, Indiana, and Oregon in that order. And picking the teams with the higher power rating to win. So I believe Oregon beats Texas Tech, Indiana beats Oklahoma, Ohio State beats Alabama, Georgia beats Texas A&M. Indiana, Oregon play in the Fiesta Bowl, Ohio State and Georgia play in the Peach Bowl. The game that I'd be the least confident about here would be Texas Tech, Oregon. I think that game could go either way. But I expect Oregon to be healthy in the playoffs, doing a bit of projection here. So I think they would win that game, and I also think they're better than Texas Tech. It's also going to go the same for the semifinals, where I'm going to pick who I have power rated higher to win. And as of right now, that's Indiana over Oregon, and that is Georgia over Ohio State, though I can really see these games going either way. I could see any of these teams winning at all. I think these are going to be the 4 teams where the national championship comes from: Oregon, Georgia, Ohio State, and Indiana. It's going to be from one of those 4. There are some teams who could bust that: Notre Dame, Alabama, and Texas Tech. Those are the other 3 that I think could bust that top 4 and win it all. Those are the 7 teams who I think have a decent shot to win it all. There's other teams that have a sliver of a chance, but those 7, I think, probably make up 90% of odds to win the national championship, make up like 90% of that group's chances. And for the champion, I am thinking that as of right now, Georgia, with that win over Texas and with the fact that they are peaking against Texas, it felt like they began to figure out some defense, and Stockton's been playing incredibly well. I believe that it's going to be one of these 4 teams, and with Georgia at number 1 in my power ratings, I'm just rolling with who I think is the best team in the country right now, and that's the Georgia Bulldogs. A week ago, it was Ohio State. At one point, I thought that Indiana to end the year would be the best team, and I picked them to win it all. I've picked Oregon to win it all in prior brackets, and at the start of the year, it was Penn State. This is one of the more exciting like seasons that I can remember, and it's very close at the top. So I'm going to roll with Kirby Smart, Ryan Day, Kurt Signetti, Dan Lanning, some of the better coaches and better teams, obviously, to win it all. And as of this week, it's going to be Georgia. This will probably be wrong. Let me know what you think of this bracket down in the comment section below. And the reason I didn't switch back like I usually do is because I forgot to shut out that countdown timer. Is what it is. Oh. Yeah, I'm tired too. That's also what I'm thinking is going on here. Is I'm a bit tired. Let me see. Yeah, Tyler McDowell, drummer. I can't believe the regular season is only 2 games left too. This season flew by. And it flew by for me more than other seasons, particularly because this has been the busiest fall of my life. Helping my family move, running this channel full time. We've made actually some pretty decent money off of this channel, expanding to shorts, expanding this platform. We have a team at college football with Sam. Yeah. So this has been pretty incredible. Pretty incredible. John Manduck, we would be 9-1 if we didn't play Oklahoma and scheduled a lower tier team. That's what I'm saying. And we beat Maryland and lose to Ohio State, we would be 10-2. The problem with that is 10-2 Michigan without that Oklahoma game, I don't think gets in with a loss to OSU. And the reason being they would have lost to their only 2 good teams they played. And Michigan's conference schedule is garbage. It's so bad. It is one of the most depressing conference schedules that I can remember. It's pretty incredible how bad Michigan's Big Ten schedule is. Like, if they go 9-3, it's not a success. It's just okay. We didn't fail, but we didn't succeed either. It's a purgatory-like limbo if Michigan goes 9-3. If they go 10-2, the season is a success because they played a tough non-con opponent who reached the playoffs. USC is going to win 9 games. I don't think they drop their final 2. They will drop one of them, in my opinion, but the other, no. They will have beaten a Nebraska team that had a winning record. They will have beaten a Washington team with a winning record. Maryland, Purdue, Northwestern, like Michigan State, Wisconsin, not awesome teams, but you beat all the teams you should beat. And then to, that Washington win, that Nebraska win, and then the Ohio State win, if they win the Ohio State game, and if they beat Maryland, who they should beat, that's why they're nearly 2 touchdown favorites over them, then yeah, the season is a success. And with that Oklahoma game, yes, you take a loss because of that, but you now have enough of a strong schedule to stand on to where with the Ohio State game, if you win it, you will certainly get in the college football playoff if you beat Ohio State. I mean, they will, with the Michigan win over Ohio State, with how much Ohio State has been talked about by a lot of analysts in the Big Ten as being better than last year, and how the betting markets have them as the overwhelming favorite to win it all. If Michigan were to win that game, there is no way they'd be left out. Again, not picking it to happen as of right now, but complaining about scheduling the Oklahoma game, that Oklahoma game in part is why you will be a lock to make it if you somehow win. And yeah, Ohio State's is pretty bad too. It is. The reason I wasn't criticizing theirs along with Michigan is because Ohio State's won all of their games so far. So all we know about Ohio State is that they're top 5. We don't know where they are in that. We speculate that they're number 1, but are they? We'll have to figure that out. But with Michigan, I mean, with Michigan, they could be anywhere from number 10 to number 25, honestly. And they're probably closer to 25 than 10, but we don't know. I mean, if they win by a lot against Maryland and just beating Ohio State and what people have said that team is, how could you not start to say, well, maybe this is a team that's close to number 10? But anyway, that's topic for another day. We will do an early Michigan-Ohio State preview later this week, that's for sure. Now I want to move on, and I do want to discuss James Franklin and Virginia Tech hiring him. According to Pete Thamel, James Franklin has been hired as the new head coach of Virginia Tech. Him and the Hokies are finalizing a deal. And I'm not an expert. I am not someone who is going to perfectly gauge this hire. And if anyone says they are lying to you. But I wanted to share my thoughts on Virginia Tech hiring James Franklin. This is an A-plus hire for the Virginia Tech Hokies, and I'm going to tell you why. So, first and foremost, Franklin knows how to build a program that is dead in the water. See Vanderbilt, see Penn State. Is he a big game winner? No. But you don't need that right now at Virginia Tech, and you probably weren't going to get one. What you need is someone who can build your program and get you to be flirting with college football playoff contention and ACC championships. And with Virginia Tech's athletic department pledging to fundraise more money, to commit more money, and spend more money on college football, that combined with Franklin's recruiting expertise in the DMV area, what he did at Penn State, his blueprint for rebuilding programs and for preparing players, especially on the defensive side of the football, to have a life after college football, after college, to have success in the NFL. There are so many players. I mean, you can think of multiple defensive backs, multiple linebackers, defensive linemen for Penn State, even offensive linemen like Olu Fashanu. That was Penn State's first round offensive lineman since the invention of Big Ten divisions, and those have ended. Those have ended since 2023. But he did a pretty good job developing players on both sides of the ball, particularly on defense. And we've heard it from several Penn State commits where wherever James Franklin ends up, they either wanted to follow him there or at least entertain the idea and check it out. Franklin is widely respected by multiple players, multiple coaches. I think that, at Penn State, he pretty much bombed it, and there's clearly a ceiling to him, more of a ceiling than a lot of people realize. Penn State is a really good job that, with its location and its alignment and its history, can be a powerhouse and better than where Franklin left it. But Franklin helped rebuild it and put it in the position it is now, to where they're searching for something greater. And for Virginia Tech, the height of your program has been Frank Beamer, for example. Winning ACC championships, losing a few games here and there, most of the time going to New Year's Six bowl games and competing, but losing and sometimes winning, doing a great job developing players, having Bud Foster on defense with the lunch pail and this, blue collar, hard work ethic semblance of being fundamentally sound and suffocating on the defensive side of the football. That sounds pretty James Franklin to me. So I love this hire for Virginia Tech. And I was of the belief that Florida State should fire Mike Norvell and bring in James Franklin. And that with Florida State's resources, commitment, their brand, and the fact that they had more resources and access to talent than most teams in the conference, minus Miami, now that I think Clemson's pretty dead in the water, that he'd be able to dominate there. And instead of Florida State getting him, Virginia Tech has him. And I thought that he was at a good enough caliber to be a head coach and a leader and someone to bring Florida State to a higher level than Mike Norvell has put them at. So that's high praise. And Virginia Tech was able to get a coach that I think would have worked out pretty well at Florida State or really any ACC school for that matter. I think Franklin is kind of an ACC head coach, where at the Big Ten, at some of these top-end programs, he was never going to get them to the mountaintop, at least at Penn State. Maybe one day he does. We don't know the future. But in the ACC, with where it's currently at, and the current coaching hierarchy, the spending hierarchy, the lack of blue bloods in that conference, you have some potential new bloods in Miami. Clemson was one of those for a bit. Florida State was one under Bobby Bowden and part of the Jimbo Fisher era, and maybe for 1 year under Norvell in that 13-0 2023 season. There's a lot of opportunity for Virginia Tech to compete for college football playoff spots pretty regularly, to win 10, 11 games in the regular season, and for Lane Stadium to be energetic, electric, and a great environment in college football once again, because now they have competent teams to go along with that amazing environment and location. Another thing to point out is that this job is very similar to Penn State in the sense that this job is more rural, out in the middle of nowhere, with a unique location and a unique history and story. They were a great team for quite a long time in the Big East, then in the ACC. They've since fallen off, kind of entered in their own dark age. And the fact that it's similar to Penn State, and I guess you could even say similar to Vanderbilt in a way, where at the time at least James Franklin took them over, where Virginia Tech, Penn State, Vanderbilt were pretty much at rock bottom. Had some coaching chaos. Penn State had the whole sanctions due to the Jerry Sandusky stuff, and those are all programs that aren't necessarily like in a extreme recruiting hotbed. Like Penn State, where they are, pretty rural. Vanderbilt, they're not out in the middle of nowhere, but Tennessee isn't exactly the same as, the Bible Belt or the Sun Belt or the deep, deep South in terms of recruiting prowess, or Florida or Texas or California. It has nice talent, though. So does Virginia. So does Pennsylvania, where they're a step below those other places I mentioned, but they still have a lot of in-state talent and a lot of local ties. So I like the situation, the circumstances. I think Franklin is a good recruiter. He has a proven process. Virginia Tech is pledging new investment, and with the change in the level of head coach and roster he'll be playing week to week, obviously the roster will be a downgrade from what he had at Penn State, but if he can get a good class, nail the transfer portal, which would be an adaptation from his previous philosophy where he was a bit stiff there at Penn State, he won't have the same challenges at the top in the ACC that he did in the Big Ten. So love this hire by Virginia Tech. Hopefully they can hit the ground running, quickly get a great recruiting class, portal class, and I would love to see them succeed. I would love to see them succeed in the ACC under Franklin. All right, now time to do some previews and predictions. That's what it's time to do now. Let me check out the chat, see what everyone's thinking. Make sure to like if you haven't already, to subscribe, like the video. Love to hear your thoughts. All that typing just to have your comment deleted. Well, who deleted your comment? And yeah, you are not getting Oregon -7 against USC. The line's already up to 10.5. We're gonna talk about this right now. When Phil Knight dies, Oregon is effed. I don't think so. You're forgetting he could probably just give money to Oregon. You're forgetting that he has kids who are fairly wealthy. And you also don't know when he's going to die. Like, yeah, it probably will be soon. That's what the odds say. But you don't know. Like we can't predict the future. You're basically betting against God whenever you're trying to predict the future. And sometimes you'll be right, but most of the time you won't be when you're trying to predict the future. And not just like the immediate future is easier, but the far, far future and someone dying or a team's entire football trajectory based on that dying, that's far, far in the future. I mean, you'd get like plus 10,000 odds with what you're saying, especially given the fact that I don't think Dan Lanning wants to leave there. I don't think he would. I don't. I think Oregon, with its with NIL, with its location, with how it's winning in its recent history, it's one of the top jobs in the sport right now. I know it's not a blue blood, but my own Wolverines, I don't think have the pedigree that Oregon does as a job. I don't think a lot of SEC schools have the pedigree of a job that Oregon does. And Oregon's uniquely situated where if you're Lanning, you can win Oregon its first national title and be their savior. Why would you go to an SEC school like LSU or Texas, for example? They've already won titles, and you're playing in a much tougher league. And more importantly, to a certain degree, you'd have to restart over there from what you already have. Less so at Texas, more so at LSU, because I don't think Kelly did an amazing job with that roster. But let's talk about USC and Oregon here. This is a game that I have a very strong lean on, and I'm not even going to consider backing off of it like I did for Oregon over Iowa. We have a potential Big Ten championship elimination game on our hands. USC versus Oregon is a college football playoff and Big Ten championship game eliminator. That didn't make any sense. USC versus Oregon is a college football playoff and Big Ten championship game. Oh, play-in game. Yeah, you guys can probably tell that I'm not mentally all there. USC versus Oregon is a college football playoff and Big Ten championship game play-in. Big Ten championship game play-in game. Yeah. USC versus Oregon is a college football playoff and Big Ten championship game play-in game. Oregon is favored by anywhere from 8.5, 9.5. Line has jumped up to some places at 10.5. They are ranked 8th, 9-1, 6-1 in Big Ten play. USC is 8-2. They are 5-1, no, 6-1 in Big Ten play, and they're ranked 17th. The 17th ranked USC Trojans travel to play the 8th ranked Oregon Ducks in what is essentially a college football playoff and Big Ten championship game play-in game. If Michigan beats Ohio State, the winner of this game will go to Indianapolis most likely, based on the combined conference opponents' win percentage for the Trojans and the Ducks, which is higher than for the Wolverines and the Buckeyes, who the winner of this game will be tied with if Michigan wins out and beats Ohio State, who, look, is going to beat Rutgers by 50. And the winner of this game gets to play their biggest rival the following weekend, who they both outmatch in a way that cannot be described. Like, USC is dramatically better than UCLA. Washington's offense sucks at scaling against great defensive fronts. Oregon is one of those. This is a huge game. We're going to be doing several videos on it. Oregon is favored, again, by 8.5, 9.5. Lines creeped up to 10.5 at some places, and I have a very strong read on this game. College football is in attendance for this 3:30 p.m. Eastern time game on CBS. It'll be a 12:30 p.m. local time kickoff for both teams in the Pacific time zone. 55 degrees Fahrenheit. Oregon at 9-1, 6-1 in conference play, and USC at 8-2, 6-1 in conference play. Let's start off by taking a look at the visitor schedule for the Trojans. USC, outside of losing to Illinois and Notre Dame and playing a little bit sketchy on the road against Nebraska and actually sketchy against Iowa at home, they have looked ridiculously good when all things are clicking. And what they've been able to do against Nebraska and Iowa, where they were not clicking on all cylinders and yet they found ways to win, has impressed me. I do believe pretty strongly that Lincoln Riley and USC are heading in the right direction, and that next year, and especially 2 years down the road, they will be a consistent top 10 team that will be competing for national championships. This is a program that for so long, whether it was under Clay Helton or Lane Kiffin, or in the first few years of the Lincoln Riley era outside of his first year, where there was a bit of mirage of championship caliber genes, but that quickly faded away in 23 and 24, where USC's had to suffer being a blue blood and kind of living in its own shadow, in a sense, and not being able to live up to it, and having plenty of dysfunction behind the scenes, being out recruited in their own state. And Riley, both off the field and on the field, is beginning to fix these things rather slowly. And of course, you'd prefer it if you fix these things in year 2 instead of year 4, but some people have to learn it the hard way. And I think he has. The defense is getting better. It's actually improved over the past few weeks. Learned some lessons, I believe, from that Notre Dame game. And the offense has steadily remained pretty admirable, even as it's entered Big Ten play. Had to play a good Michigan defense, and they tore them apart. Had to play a good Notre Dame defense, and they had opportunities to score in the 30s and win that game. They were able to do just enough to beat Nebraska, just enough to beat an Iowa defense that's flirting with the top 5. This is a huge game for Lincoln Riley. It's one of the bigger games of his tenure. I don't think it is a game that will get him fired, for example, where if he loses this game, we can sit back and make a prediction of, well, this is the game that got Lincoln Riley fired. He won't be, but it shows he can't break through. No, but a win here would mean so much in the sense that beating Oregon on the road, given where Oregon's rated, would mean, I think, that Lincoln Riley and USC maybe have arrived, and it might punch their college football playoff ticket. For Oregon here, the Ducks, it's a big game for Dan Lanning too. Not in the same way. I don't think they're under the same type of pressure, but Oregon's been doubted this year, and I don't like it, and I've made a video about it. I'll link that video down below in the pinned comment. It's talking about why Oregon's underestimated. This is a top 3, top 4, unanimously, power-rated team. There's a fly in my room. That's why I'm looking in my studio. That fly is honestly what people who doubt Oregon are to me. They're incredibly annoying. There's just this like buzzing in the background about how, well, Oregon lost Indiana, but we don't know if Indiana's good because blue chip ratio and logo, and they beat Penn State, but we don't know if Penn State's all that good because James Franklin got fired and they imploded after that game. Totally can't be that Oregon maybe mentally broke a top 10 Penn State team. They only beat Iowa by 2, and Iowa sucks because Iowa, they only beat Wisconsin by 14. Minnesota and Rutgers don't count. Same with the non-con and same with Northwestern. It's like that little fly, like this big, what this fly is. It's disappeared now. This big, juicy, loud fly that is just so annoying. It's like nails on the chalkboard. And it's not just that way to me and probably other college football people. It's also probably a bit annoying to Oregon internally. No matter what Oregon does, Oregon doesn't really get credit for what they have produced on the field and what they have produced in ratings. It's a big problem for a lot of these top-end Big Ten teams, even to a certain degree with USC. People don't take Lincoln Riley seriously. People think that Ohio State hasn't played anyone, and therefore they're like somehow absolute garbage. And people think that Indiana also hasn't played anyone, even though they beat this top 3 power-rated Oregon team. It's a problem with the Big Ten that has some credit to it, because with Penn State being bad, the scheduling in the Big Ten has been absolute garbage. The SEC does have tougher schedules, but at the same time, you got to look at the ratings and you got to look at the on-field product and the film and the dominance metrics and the points per drive and the points per play, and you will see that USC and Oregon, yes, but especially Oregon in that upper echelon with Indiana and Ohio State, are really good teams, guys. Do not underestimate these teams. That's why I love that College Game Day is coming here, because USC, when healthy and when they're able to hit their stride as a top 10 team, when Oregon is able to do that, they are clearly a top 5 team. So let me give you some evidence as to why that is. Oregon is top 7 in both points per play forced, so offensive points per play, and points per play allowed, defensive points per play. USC's 43rd on defense, but 5th on offense. And USC, in playing Notre Dame, Michigan, Illinois, Nebraska, Iowa, they've actually played a pretty tough schedule, really. And to come out of that already with 8 wins, which is over their preseason win total of 7.5 before their final 2 games, is impressive. That is something that we aced in our preseason. Some other things, of course, we got wrong, but on College Football with Sam, we, as is said in the like and subscribe break that we insert in all of our videos, we hit the nail on the head more than we break our thumb with the hammer. That's what we do. We told you that preseason USC to flirt with the playoff was very likely. We even said them making the playoff is likely. With that loss to Illinois and then also a loss to Notre Dame that I thought was not going to happen, that kind of threw a wrench in the USC is likely to make the playoffs pick. But the over on the win total, which I thought by the summer was a lock to occur, has happened with 2 games left. And I imagine they'll at least beat UCLA if they do not win this game. A game where there is a path for USC to win despite being around a 2-score underdog at this point. For the Trojans, what I'm curious to see in this matchup is how their offensive line holds up against an Oregon defensive line that is not eye-popping statistically, but on film and even not just paying attention to the defensive lineman on film, but looking at your TV and just seeing how opposing quarterbacks and how the run game has to change in order to move the ball in this Oregon defense. This is the best defense that Lupoy and Lanning have ever had at Oregon by quite a big margin. And they are physical. They allow initial push at the lines of scrimmage. I've seen it against Indiana. We've seen it at times against Penn State. I saw it actually at times against Minnesota and definitely Iowa. But after about that initial 1 to 2 yards, and Iowa's offensive line is elite, so there's no shame in giving up that initial push from that O-line. After about 1 to 2 yards of push, nothing after that. You get nothing. And when you do, it's because Oregon misreads the play. Like, you did something they didn't expect. When all else is equal, and it's just physicality versus physicality, athleticism versus athleticism, player discipline versus player discipline, that defense will eat you alive, and they will beat you up. For USC, what can Justin Ta'anu, Alani Noah, John-Ray Reed, Elijah Page, Killian O'Connor, Tobias Raymond, what can they do for their quarterback and for their running back, King Miller? And we also got to see a little bit of Brian Jackson against Iowa, which is nice. What can they do for them? Because this Oregon defensive back group, too, talk about Ifeoma Badegwu, Brandon Finney, Jaden Canady, Dylan Thieneman, Aaron Flowers, Peyton Woodyard, Kingston Lopa, Dalen Austin, Theron Johnson. It's a legit secondary. There's no paper tigerness to it. What they did against Penn State, what they were able to do against Rutgers, what they were able to do against Minnesota and Iowa. I know they don't have vaunted passing attacks, but even Indiana. Indiana has round 1, pick 1 at quarterback, possibly the best quarterback in America, elite college receivers who will be day 2 or day 3 picks on Sunday, an awesome offensive line when healthy, and the best coaching staff in America. And Oregon's secondary scored over 33% of Oregon's total points in that game. They were not the reason why Indiana won and Oregon lost. So I think that you're going to need more than Jaden Mayava connecting with Makai Lemon and Jacoby Lane for USC to win this game. If they're able to do that, but Oregon's able to get pressure and shut down the rushing attack, similar to what Notre Dame did, where Notre Dame couldn't really stop the passing attack, but they could shut down the rushing attack. And because Jaden Mayava isn't Caleb Williams, he isn't Baker Mayfield, he isn't Kyler Murray, when you get him to throw it enough times, especially on the road, he will make some mistakes. That was evident against Illinois too. Then I think Oregon will win, especially with what their rushing offense provides against a USC defense that is well coordinated and well coached, but just does not have the players necessary to be able to win games on their own against this type of Oregon team. They were never winning the game on their own against Notre Dame. They were always going to give up high 20s, low 30s. They just needed to get a few key stops and maybe a game-breaking turnover, and USC's offense needed to carry that team outside of that, and they couldn't. For Oregon, they're a more balanced team. Dante Moore, when he's protected, is awesome. Under pressure, different story. So USC needs to bring pressure somehow. Kenyon Sadiq is going to be healthy again. Pay attention to Oregon. Their offensive line, led by Iapani Lololu, got Dave Uli, Emmanuel Pregnon, Alex Harkey, I think, is back, and then also Isaiah World, the left tackle. It's a big, mean, physical offensive line. Former USC Trojan defensive tackle Bear Alexander, pay attention to him. Same with Tatum Tuioti, Mateo Uyunglele, cornerbacks Brandon Finney and Ifeanyi Badegwu. And for USC, a few players to shut out on defense. Safeties Bishop Fitzgerald and Kamari Ramsey, if Ramsey's healthy. He's been in and out of a lot of games this year. Linebacker Eric Gentry, defensive end Anthony Lucas. Pay attention to those players. USC has a few players on defense that really have a strong impact. And it is a unit that, especially up front, is young. So Cameron Fountain, Jide Abasiri, Devin Tompkins, Desmond Steffens, much of their two deep there, are going to return, and he even got Jakeem Stewart, who recorded an interception against Iowa, off of a deflection. So those are some players to pay attention to in what is going to be a just monster game. Oregon only allows 4.9 opponent yards per play. That's first, and their strength of schedule per ESPN is 31st. That's tougher than Indiana's 38th, and Ohio State's at 50th. There is a real chance in the playoffs, because as of right now, it's Ohio State and I think Texas Tech that have the top two defenses. Include Indiana in there too. Like, those are the three. I'd have Ohio State 1. Don't quite know about Tech or Indiana. Oregon would be in that top 5 at either 4th or 5th. There's a chance that throughout the playoffs, with how Oregon's playing on defense, they could finish number 1. There's a chance there. That's how good they've performed. I thought they would improve defensively this year, but they have outperformed my expectations by so much that I'm not even going to say I was right on that fact. I was right about the direction, not even close to right about how good they were going to be. I did not think they'd be this good. For USC, they're 56th there. They're 4th, though, in yards per play on offense. Oregon is only 20th there. The QB matchup is fascinating because, on one hand, Dante Moore has more upside than Maiava, I believe. But he also has a much better supporting cast when healthy. He does not have Mekhi Lemon or Jacoby Lane, but his running back room is healthier. And more importantly, even when USC's running back room is healthy, at which point it's one of the best in America, the offensive line that Oregon has and their tight ends and also the defense to be able to give that offense a wider margin for error and to not put pressure on them is invaluable. It's amazing. Both passers have passer ratings in the 160s. Maiava leads America in QBR at a 90.7. Moore is a 72.5 QBR. It's 28th in college football. I'm curious to see how these staffs run these quarterbacks, if at all. I strongly believe, given what I've seen from Indiana against Oregon, where Mendoza not really on designed runs, but QB draws, and then Iowa with Gronowski, not for a lot of the game. Oregon defended him fairly well, but there were times where he was able to get loose, or like on that 4th and goal QB draw, get into the end zone, where he did just enough to help Iowa be in that game where, say, if they had Cade McNamara in that game, it probably would have been an Oregon blowout, even with all the issues they had. So how does USC utilize that? And then for Oregon, your rushing offense is already awesome as is. I know that USC is going to sell out to stop that because your rushing offense is far better than your passing offense, and their coaches know it. So are you going to add in your quarterback there to pull the ball out, and that way a defense that's already overwhelmed, that's already thin, that is far from where they want it to be, now has to think about one additional thing to stop? So there's a lot of possible options to use these quarterbacks to attack this defense. I think that is especially the case with Oregon. There's a lot more variability with what Dante Moore could do in this game than with what Jaden Mayava could do. Let's take a look at some keys to this game. We've already talked about this in an early preview, so we'll just go over these quickly. Rushing offense, havoc rate, so that's passes defended, pass breakups, interceptions, forced fumbles, sacks, tackles for loss. That's what havoc plays are. Who does the best job at limiting those? Who does the best job at forcing those? USC's defense is better at creating havoc plays than Oregon's, but Oregon's outside of that is way better than USC on defense, and Oregon does a better job at stopping havoc plays than the Trojans do. For rushing offense, both are above 6 yards per carry, but Oregon's has been consistent for basically the entire season, even against tough fronts such as Wisconsin's or Iowa's. At times against Indiana, either they got around 5 yards per carry or more, or IU gave them a TFL. And that's really good because no one can really run on Indiana. That is a strength of the Bryant Haynes defense they run, is you cannot run on them. If you beat them, you pick apart their zone, or you just out-athlete them at defensive back. That is how you beat Indiana's defense. Even against Penn State, outside of that long Singleton run, which was more on the safeties than the defensive line, they had to clean that up, and they didn't. They took bad angles. Outside of that run, they held Penn State to like 2 yards per carry, which is just insane. They held them to 2 yards per carry at home outside of that. Pass rush, who gets home? Who does a better job at protecting the quarterback? And then there are a few things that specifically relate to Oregon because Oregon's a favorite here. Oregon's at home. They're the higher power rated team. They're the more talented team. They are closer to where they want to be than USC is to where they want to be. So a lot rides here on Oregon. Oregon has more controllables than USC does. If USC wants to win, they're going to have to play closer to their ceiling than they usually have. And Oregon is going to not get close to their ceiling. They're going to have to not get close to that. If Oregon's pass defense is not legit, USC is live here, and Oregon is in trouble. Is it the best in college football? I don't know, but I don't think it's a paper tiger. I do believe it is a top 5 pass defense and could be the best. And there's also Oregon's health. If Oregon has, say, Evan Stewart is magically healthy enough to play, I imagine they'll hold him out until the college football playoff. Although you could redshirt him, and because you can play a guy in 4 games, and those are only regular season games, you only have 2 games remaining. So if he is healthy and ready to go, and you don't think he'll get re-injured, you could play him here, but I don't think they will. Nonetheless, if they can get Gary Bryant Jr. back and DeCorian Moore back, I think those guys are worth some points, given how thin Oregon's receiver room is. Typically, a wide receiver probably isn't worth a point or more unless they're Jeremiah Smith. But since Oregon's been so banged up there and they're so thin, having an additional receiver option, along with getting Sadiq back last week, is huge for this Oregon offense. I think, and I said earlier that I am leaning very strongly to one side. And I am. And as you can probably tell by the roster matchups on the screen, I am very much leaning in Oregon's direction. I've tried to, in this segment, be fair and objective to USC. I strongly believe I have. There is a slim chance for them to win, but it's slim. In no way, shape, or form is this number big enough. There is a massive discrepancy in the body types that Oregon has and the way those bodies are put in a position from their staff versus USC's body types and how USC wants to play ball and how that matches up with Oregon. So USC, they want to run the ball first and then play off of that. Well, Oregon doesn't give up the explosive runs that really help this USC offense get in rhythm. And what has USC's weakness been on defense? especially on the road. Like, toxically on the road. It becomes apparent within the first few drives that USC's defense has one beaming weakness. Like a massive prison spotlight flashing before your eyes. It's the run defense. Illinois ran all over them, and Illinois has struggled to run the ball. If Michigan has a healthy Haynes, they probably don't win. They may have lost while running for 200 or 300 yards. Against Notre Dame, they actually ran for 300. Nebraska with Emmett Johnson's really good. Their offensive line was also improving, but Nebraska was still able to run effectively even after Raiola went out. It became pretty obvious what they were doing. Iowa in that first half was dominating USC. Then they made adjustments. This is different. Oregon has the best lines of scrimmage play out of anyone they've played so far. And their secondary is way better than Notre Dame's. They do not have a Leonard Moore, though Brandon Finney might be close. He might actually be their Leonard Moore. But they have more than just one good DB out of their nickel package out of 5. They have 5 good defensive backs out of their 5, and a few of them are elite. They have a rushing offense that is proven in November to not just be good at getting explosives, but also good in power situations. And they have an elite tight end. So I believe that Oregon is going to win and cover, and I think they're going to dominate. I read this game pretty much like how I'm reading. It's not to the same degree. It's not. But I called my shot with Indiana over Illinois. And while I don't quite like this matchup as much as I do that one, it's close. I like this about as much as I like Texas Tech over BYU. I think it's going to be, you're going to know in the second quarter who's going to win. It's not going to be pretty. And Oregon, it's not just the roster matchups. It's the position. It's the fact that Oregon has an additional day of rest. It's the home field advantage. It's the idea that Oregon is deep enough to play these games close to their ceiling in November, and USC just doesn't have that yet. It's no disrespect to Lincoln Riley, no disrespect to USC at all. I think they're a good team. But Oregon is that much better. They're in a different tier. College game day's coming. That place is going to be rocking, and they're getting healthier. Moore played a good game against Minnesota. Maeva, I don't think, is playing to the same degree that he was earlier in the year. And another thing, too, Oregon's pass defense is legit. I think in a way that maybe no pass defense outside of maybe Nebraska's, but I don't think Nebraska's the talent that Oregon does in pass defense. Like, there is one pass defense in the Big Ten I'm pretty confident is better than Nebraska's. 2 of them, actually. Those would be Ohio State and Oregon. Probably Indiana, too. But from a talent perspective, I know Oregon and Ohio State. Maeva didn't even complete 40% of his passes against Nebraska on the road. Now, tie that with the fact that they also didn't run well in that game on the road, and that was against a Nebraska defense that can't stop the run. Now imagine, and that was off a bye too. Now imagine coming off a physical game against Iowa, where it takes 60 minutes to beat them, all-out effort. And now you have to go on the road to a team with an extra day of rest, who played an inferior opponent, got to substitute in backups, is not going to be as tired as you. They're already deeper than you. They're better coached. They have better recruiting. It is proven, not saying this is going to be the case under the new regime, but Riley's new regime is new. It's newer and fresher than Lanning's because of all the changes he made. So far, Lanning's Oregon has developed better than Riley's USC. There's just so much that goes in Oregon's favor here that I think this is going to be a blowout. It's going to be bad. Oregon, it could be 10.5, it could be 11.5, it could be 12, it could be 13, it could be 14. You can keep ratcheting up the number, and I think that Oregon here will name the score. Don't know how big the blowout will be, because Oregon, same thing with Indiana, same thing with Ohio State, with a lot of teams, they call off the dogs once it gets to a certain point. But this is going to be bad. This will be not quite Indiana over Illinois. though there is a slim potential of that happening if Oregon clicks in every way and USC falls apart. But it's up there with those shots that I called, with Texas Tech over BYU, which we aced, with Indiana over Illinois, which we aced. If you want to find any comfort in this as a USC fan, I did not call Penn State to blow out Oregon, but I thought they would win by 2 scores, and instead it was Oregon that should have won by 2 scores. But in my blowout shot calls, we're 2-0 so far. I'm pretty confident in this one happening. And as for the Big Ten standings and what that means, this is a game where the winner is going to the college football playoff, especially if they're Oregon. The loser, if they're USC, is staying home. If you're Oregon, the Washington game becomes a must-win. If you somehow lose, the winner of this game will likely win out, and at that point, you root for Michigan to beat Ohio State, and then the winner of this game gets to go to Indianapolis, as long as, well, actually, I think they go even if Michigan beats Ohio State, but say loses to Maryland, because their combined conference, well, it depends. If Michigan loses to Maryland, beats Ohio State, and you got USC and Ohio State, USC beat Illinois, so the win percentage versus common opponents triggers, and then Ohio State goes to Indy. It's very complicated. These new tiebreakers are very complicated. That's why we love them. But I think that if Michigan beats Ohio State, they're probably going to beat Maryland too. Could be wrong on that front. So the winner of this game is a shot to go to Indy. They're definitely in the college football playoff, because if USC wins this game, I don't think they lose to UCLA. Oregon wins this game. Even if they lose, I don't think they're going to lose to Washington. I think Oregon's going to, at minimum, same with USC, split these next 2 games. I'm just of the conviction that Oregon will dominate USC and they will win in a pretty massive blowout. And at that point, I hope people will take recognition of what Oregon is and who they are, but we'll have to see. They might just excuse it away, saying that USC isn't all that good, even though they could have won that game against Notre Dame, could have easily won that game against Illinois, and there is a world where they're actually 8-0, but 10-0 entering this game and undefeated. Okay. Gone a little bit longer than I wanted to, but this is a good game, so I wanted to discuss it. I'm curious to see what the reaction in the live chat is. We're going to pop out the chat, though, address some of these super chats, then we'll get on to the rest of the show. And these segments will all go by much quicker than that Oregon USC one, which I think was close to, I think that was close to 30 minutes. That's just because I love talking about it. There will be so many videos on this game, and I'm going to milk it because I'm very confident in the result, but I also have a lot of respect for both programs. The chat is good again. Thanks, guys. What was happening? You said the chat is good again. Thank you for the $2 anyway, Chris Lane. Don't exactly know what you're talking about. Oregon will probably win, but I want USC to win because I think that USC and Oregon both get playoff berths with a USC win. So there is a world where USC wins out, Oregon wins outside of the Oregon wins outside of the USC game, so both are 10-2. Or Michigan beats Ohio State, they're 10-2. Ohio State's 11-1, and Oregon's 10-2, but Indiana's 12-0. Then you have 5 Big Ten teams at 10-2. I would be inclined to think that possibly one of those Big Ten teams gets left out, but also the SEC has more chaos potential than the Big Ten does. It just does. Like, Oklahoma could totally lose to one of Missouri or LSU, who are not very good teams, and if they do, they're probably left out. Texas could lose to one of Arkansas or A&M. Alabama could lose to Auburn, and a 9-3 Alabama with that schedule, I don't think gets in. Could be wrong. Ole Miss could lose to Mississippi State, and a 10-2 Ole Miss probably deserves to get left out over any 10-2 Big Ten team, just based on power ratings, based on the fact that they they have a cheap, bad non-con, and they faced a very easy SEC strength of schedule. Vandy could go 9-3 if they lose to Kentucky, which there's a world where that happens, or if they lose to a Tennessee team that could also lose to Florida this coming weekend. There's still a world where the Big Ten gets 5 in. I don't think that happens, though. I think the best case scenario for the Big Ten is they get 4 in. I'll say it here publicly. I think there is a better chance, a way better chance, that Michigan beats Ohio State than USC beats Oregon. It's not even a matchup thing, because I think Ohio State actually matches up with Michigan well. Not nearly as well as Oregon over USC, but Ohio State should win. But the venue, the rivalry history, and also the fact that, again, I do think Oregon matches up better with USC than Ohio State does over Michigan, even though power ratings-wise, Ohio State and Michigan are further apart than USC, Oregon. Maybe I'm proven wrong. I mean, I'll admit that I'm wrong, but I'm 10 out of 10 confident that Oregon wins that game. Not 10 out of 10 confident about the blowout. 2023 should have been a blowout, and USC hung around against Oregon there. They did hang around, but there was no question of who was going to win. But I am very confident that Oregon's going to win that game, and I'm confident they'll win pretty convincingly. But thank you, Chris, for the $5 super chat and the $2 super chat. Let's see what everyone else is saying. Pissed off Ohioan. Why is Notre Dame ranked out of Miami when they have the exact same record? Power ratings. Also brand bias. A lot of people love Notre Dame for whatever reason. Okay, this comment. So, the Ohio State Buckeye. Indiana is playing at their ceiling. They are as good as they can be. Ohio State plays near their floor and coasts through games. Ohio State can turn it up to 10 and blow anyone out. Okay. I'm going to call BS on this entire philosophy from Ohio State. And this is someone who for weeks has had Ohio State at number 1. I have them at number 2, ahead of everyone else but Georgia right now. You cannot say that Ryan Day has learned his lesson from last year and that he's moving different and then say they're playing to their floor. Because that's exactly what they were doing for the regular season last year when he hadn't learned his lesson yet, and then they got kicked in the rear by a really bad team and lost by 3 because that bad team couldn't throw a forward pass. Then they adapted, went on, had a ton of success in the playoffs, established themselves as the number 1 program, as the number 1 team that year, and they've continued that this year. So, like, which is it? I'm not saying you're not knowledgeable. I'm just, my opinion is that Ohio State is, like, we've talked about this with Penn State. We've talked about it with other teams. It's November. They're not holding the playbook back. Come on. It's so stupid. It's so, no. Come on, guys. Like, use logic here. Ohio State's the favorite to win it all. They're a pretty decent favorite to win it all. They're number 1 in power ratings. And you're telling me that they're playing at a 1 and can turn it on to 10 and blow anyone out. If they could blow anyone out, I hate to tell you guys, they wouldn't have let that Texas team with no offense outgain them by 100 yards. They wouldn't have. That would have never happened. So, come on. I don't know what you want me to say to these comments. It's like I think a lot of Buckeye fans were mad about my top 10. It's like, okay, like, if I'm wrong, I'll be wrong, but to rage out about it when I still have you number 2 and, like, you're gonna get a first round bye. It's just like, no. Indiana has played in more 1-score games. Correct. Indiana's also power rated behind you. Indiana's also dealing with injuries. And as for Ohio State, I'm sorry. None of their wins are as impressive as Indiana's at Oregon, even when fully healthy. Ohio State in a game has never looked as good as Indiana did against Oregon in that second half. They have never, because they haven't played a team to the caliber of Oregon on the road. Like, Texas is not Oregon. Texas is I had them in my top 10, and I kind of regret putting them in my top 10. They're like they're probably only 10th because of talent. They're almost entirely out of the playoffs. They lost to a Florida team who's 3-7. They haven't put together a good offense in any game against a competent defense. I don't know what to tell you. Like, and I think Ohio State's really good, and I think they have the number one program, and people think I'm hating on them, but I'm not. Like, SEC people every week say that, well, there's a new team that's number one, and it isn't Ohio State. I've not been that guy. I've had Ohio State at number one for a while. But saying they're just going to turn it up and, oh, the rushing offense all of a sudden be top 10. Like, no, it's not. Have you seen that offensive line? It's a good unit. Could be great. It's not. You're not going to be top 10 in rushing offense this year. Like, James Peoples and Bo Jackson aren't all of a sudden going to turn into, like, prime J.K. Dobbins and Travion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins. That's not how college football works. And it's game 10. It's the same thing with Michigan in 23. Like, by game 10, they were who they were. They weren't holding anything back for the playoffs. And everyone who said that looked like an idiot when Ohio State played them close and when Alabama took them to overtime and when that Washington game was a game for 3 quarters. Ohio State can win it all. They're the favorites to win it all. They, at this point, probably should win it all. But they're not going to go and blow everyone out. That's not going to happen. We've seen enough. Look at their SRS on teamrankings.com. They are ranked behind last year's team by a few points because at this point they're just beating up on scrubs. That's all they're doing. We got to see who they are in these big games. Not that we got to see if they can win them. They've proven time and time again they can, and they will at least win some of them even if they don't win it all. But they've won 8 straight games against top 10 opponents. They haven't played a top 10 opponent since that Texas game, and Texas is no longer power-rated top 10. They haven't played a top 30 FEI defense, like, the whole year outside of Texas. And yet their rushing offense and yards per carry per game on paper is outside the top 60. Just is. So, not saying they can't win it all. I've picked them to win it all more than any other team in my weekly college football playoff brackets. But tone down in the idea that they're invincible. And the only reason I say that so much is they're the only team anyone says is invincible. No one said Alabama's invincible because of the Florida State loss. No one said Georgia's invincible because of, that loss to Alabama. No one outside of maybe earlier in the year said Oregon was invincible. And now people say they're not all that good. And as for Indiana, no one's ever said they're invincible because of the talent question. And all of those are very understandable. So just calm down on that a little bit, please. Ohio State's an elite program. They're an elite team. They have the number one defense in America. They have the number one receiver core. They have the most accurate quarterback in America. To try and further exaggerate their eliteness when they're already that high is, come on. You don't need to do that. You can just say that we're number one. We're content with being number one for now. We're confident we can win out, and that's perfect because you're the odds-on favorite. Anyway, enough of my ranting and rambling. Let's get to a team that is not even guaranteed to, be in that playoff conversation, even if they beat Ohio State and Michigan, because this Maryland game is going to be tough for them. Bless me. Oh, we've already been live for an hour? I talk too much. The 18th ranked Michigan Wolverines travel to the Maryland Terrapins in a potential look-ahead spot for the Ohio State game. Sorry for that pause, guys. I think I need a drink of water before I begin my next segment. So let me go get that drink of water. I'll be right back. And welcome back. Sorry about that. I don't know what's up with me mentally, but yeah, something's up. Don't exactly, I'm serious when I say this. It's not like a super private matter, but today has felt off ever since I've woken up, and I don't exactly know why that is, but something's up, and I'm kind of, yeah, don't know exactly what it is, but I'm off, and it sucks, but we'll get through it. The 18th ranked Michigan Wolverines travel to the Maryland Terrapins to play in a look-ahead spot before the Ohio State game. Michigan's favored by 13.5 points over Maryland. Maryland stands at 4-6, 1-6 in Big Ten Conference play. This is a needed win for the Terrapins to go bowling. For Michigan, they need a win here because even if they beat Ohio State, they won't get to the playoffs if they lose this game. And this is a losable game based on Michigan's track record throughout the season, where they have looked pretty poorly on the road. This is a road game, even though they're 8-2, 6-1, and ranked 18th in the college football playoff rankings, and a little bit higher than that in the AP and coaches poll. This is a team that is not power rated any higher than 15th. They're a top 20, top 25 power rated team. And ultimately, on the road, those teams are very susceptible to losing. And Michigan has won a lot of these close games and eked it out. But if anything, that's an indication at some point they won't eke it out in a close game. So why not here? It'll be a 4 p.m. Eastern time game on the Big Ten Network. Again, it's a look-ahead spot for that Ohio State game. So Michigan and their staff and their locker room, they need to be prepared here. And they cannot overlook this Maryland team. They cannot not take Michigan, or Maryland rather, seriously. I mean, Maryland has to take Michigan seriously, and I imagine they will. This is a pretty big spot for the Terrapins, too, fighting for bowl eligibility, because they should beat Michigan State if they were to win this game against Michigan. Michigan needs to win here and then beat Ohio State to reach the college football playoff. It was talked about in the Cover 3 podcast a bit today that even if Michigan beats Ohio State and beats Maryland, it's unlikely that they will go to the Big Ten championship game in Indianapolis because of how weak their conference schedule is. And that's determined by combined wins and losses of their conference opponents averaged into a win percentage. And whoever has the highest win percentage in a three-way tie, well, they get to go to Indy. So what Michigan needs is it to be a two-way tie between the Buckeyes and themselves. They cannot have a three-way tie with either USC or Oregon, as that will default to USC or Oregon going to the Big Ten championship game. So for Michigan, if you want to go to the Big Ten, you got to be rooting not just to win out, but for other teams to lose. I would argue, though, if you're Michigan, you do just want to win out, and you do not want to go to the Big Ten championship game, because I don't know if you can put two great performances back-to-back against Ohio State and Indiana in the Big Ten championship game and win both of those games. And a 10-3 Michigan might get left out of the playoffs. A 10-2 Michigan, I know for sure, does not get left out of the playoffs. And it's not even a guarantee that Michigan wins this game or beats Ohio State. All hands have to be on deck. They have to continue to get healthy, and they have to clean up some of those turnover issues that they've had in back-to-back games against Purdue and Northwestern. For Maryland, they are on a 6-game losing streak, and they are on a 3-game losing streak of losing by more than one score, by 2 or more scores. It's been rough. They looked to have a potentially good defense early on. Metrics said it was elite. I called that a paper tiger, but still thought they at least had an okay defense. That is a total mirage, and their offense is absolutely horrible. This is one of the worst teams in the Big Ten. It's already been announced that Mike Locksley is coming back for Maryland, and they're just going to try to invest more in NIL in the transfer portal. I think that And that's regardless of whether or not they beat Michigan or Michigan State. I think that's a capitulation. They're content with where they're at, and that's okay. Wisconsin, it's more of a capitulation, though, given their history, that they're bringing Fickle back and are going to try to invest in NIL. Looking at the Michigan game and the Michigan State game, they ideally need to win both, because missing a bowl with this schedule for the second year in a row, when you also had an easy schedule last year, is not a good look. If they can at least win one of those games, and they don't end at an 8-game losing streak, and maybe they have some momentum entering next year. Ideally, you want to pull off the upset here, though, against a ranked team, earn Loxley's biggest win of his career at Maryland, and then beat Michigan State, go to a bowl game, and then you really have some momentum entering next season. Some key players to keep in mind and to pay attention to. The quarterbacks, Malik Washington and Bryce Underwood. Some running backs, DeJaun Williams and Jordan Marshall. Also, pay attention to Alan Herron, Maryland's best tackle. For Michigan, center Greg Crippen, who's been phenomenal for the second half of the year. And also wide receiver Andrew Marsh for Michigan, who is Michigan's wide receiver 1, could be returning punts from here on out. So he'll be all over the field. Defensively, it's about these defensive lines. So Derek Moore, Jayshon Barham, Trey Pierce, Rayshawn Benny, Trey Williams for Michigan, Damon Payne, and for Maryland, Cam Rice, Zahir Mathis, Sidney Stewart. You also got to look out for Cole Sullivan for Michigan, their best linebacker, along with Ernest Hausman. Michigan is a better team than Maryland, pretty significantly. They're better on offense. They're better on defense. Special teams, I don't know. Michigan special teams has been pretty atrocious this year. With Maryland special teams, they have not been awesome. I do not think they've been all that good either. With special teams, it's always pretty hard to judge because a lot of special teams is just mental. So sometimes really bad special teams units can have phenomenal games. I think about Ohio State's last year against Indiana, where their special teams unit had a really good game, but they were not a good special teams unit overall, for example. So that position has a lot of variance to it. And we've seen that with Michigan this year, where Zavada has a strong leg. Zavada can still make accurate kicks and hit from long distance, but he's missed some that seem to be mental mistakes. Michigan's punting game has been pretty hit or miss, and the return game has been absolutely dreadful. Looking at the quarterbacks between the Wolverines and the Terrapins, I don't know between these two exactly who's better, but if I had to lean one way, if I really had to, it would be the quarterback who's played Oklahoma on the road, who's played Washington, who has played USC on the road. I know that Maryland has played Indiana, but that is pretty much it. They also got Washington at home. Yeah, but you're talking about playing UCLA, playing Rutgers, playing Illinois, playing Wisconsin, for example, Nebraska. Underwood has a higher completion percentage. Underwood has fewer interceptions. He averages 1.5 more yards per attempt, has a higher passer rating, and a significantly higher QBR, actually. So I would go with Underwood here to be the better quarterback in this matchup. I know Malik Washington's received some hype. Malik Washington, I do think, is a good QB. Does have a worse supporting cast than what Underwood has. Yes, he's not quite as talented. Underwood's made some throws that Washington has also matched at times, though I've seen them more from Underwood, and the supporting cast is better. So if Maryland's going to win this game, they have to have some things go their way. They have to play closer to their ceiling than Michigan, which I think, given the spot of this game, is very realistic. And Michigan has to continue to have turnover issues. That goes with Bryce Underwood, too, not just Michigan as a whole team. Some keys to this game. There's the want it factor. So Michigan is looking ahead to Ohio State. We know this. That's their Super Bowl. Michigan, they're limited. They can't win it all this year. The best they can hope for, the best finish to the season from who they are, is you win out, you beat Ohio State, you win your first-round playoff game, and then you go home in the quarterfinals. That is the absolute best-case scenario. probability says they lose one of these games between Maryland and Ohio State. They split them. Most likely beat Maryland, lose to Ohio State. That's what probability says. Everything's in front of them, though. And what would be more important out of that 2-game stretch is beating Ohio State, even if it means you lose to this bad Maryland team. The win over Ohio State would mean a lot to a team that is better than it was last year from a power ratings angle, that is recruiting better and leveling up its roster, and that will probably make some staff changes. And I imagine based on what those staff changes will probably be, it's more likely than not those staff changes result in upgrades than downgrades. Michigan is a program that is trending up. The question is, how far up are they trending? Because if it's not at a certain angle, if the rise over run isn't high enough, then Sherrone Moore will fail, even if they're trending up from where they were last year. If it is at a certain point, though, then Sherrone Moore will succeed. And a lot of that can come down to this year's game against Ohio State. You got to keep in mind that a lot of people, even if Michigan were to somehow win the next 5 years in a row, will view Michigan beating Ohio State as a fluke more than anything, due to the Tressel and Meyer years, and also due to Ohio State's brand on top of those things and how many NFL players were produced by that university, and they have kids and they tell the stories, and because Ohio State is this really big brand and really proud program and as the largest fan base in America, once you're in there, you're in there. It's like Michigan. Like Michigan and Ohio State are cults, and Ohio State's the biggest one. So, yeah, Michigan needs that win. They really need it every year. I would actually say more so than Ohio State. They need that win. But the want-it factor's there, not just for that game, but for this game too, because oftentimes in college football, unless you're the elite teams, and by elite I don't mean relative to a season, I mean the elite teams across multiple seasons, they can get up for every game. But a team like Michigan can't. A team like Maryland can't. And Maryland could be a corpse. Maryland could already be in quit mode, and they're just waiting for next year to roll around. We'll see that this Saturday. For rush defense, it's going to be really important because if Michigan is looking ahead, they're just going to want to run the ball. They're going to want to get out of there and make this game 2 hours and 30 minutes. Michigan, they're only allowing 4.1 yards per carry. That is a top 20 rushing defense, 18th in yards per carry. For Maryland, they're allowing 5.28 yards per carry, which is outside the top 90, one of the worst in America. So that favors Michigan for sure, especially when you factor that Maryland can't run the ball and Michigan is one of the best rushing offenses in America. What about quarterback play? Between Malik Washington and Bryce Underwood, who is the superior quarterback? Let me know what you think down in the comments section. And then I think the first team that reaches 3 sustainable drives, and by that I mean drives that are, you're not getting the ball inside of midfield on your opponent's territory, and you're able to produce a balanced attack and not just tons of explosives. The first team that gets there, if any team does, is going to win. And as for special teams, which unit helps out their team the most, which causes the most harm? I believe that Michigan has a lot of advantages here, outside of maybe their passing offense against a Maryland passing defense that has a good pass rush and some good safeties and cornerbacks. A lot goes Michigan's way here, but I don't really trust them to come out and dominate in a way that they should. I mean, they should have dominated Northwestern. Look at the success rate margin. They should have won that game by 4 or 5 scores if they don't turn it over. But they did not. They didn't. That's the reality. Against Purdue, they should have won by probably 2 scores, maybe 3. They did not. That's the reality. You get the point. Michigan is a team with more potential than what they've been showing. But that's the case with a lot of these teams that have talented rosters, but not elite coaching staffs, or they're young. And Michigan has both of those problems, along with some injuries and some unbalanced roster talent in where their offensive line and running backs and that's amazing, but they just don't have anything at wide receiver outside of maybe one player or two if McCulley is on his A game, and that's pretty inconsistent. So I am leaning towards Michigan winning by 7 to 13 points. I don't think they'll quite pass 13 and a half. Wouldn't be shocked if they do. Would be a little bit surprised if they lose, given how bad they've looked 2 games in a row, and I just don't think they're that bad. So I think they'll play a little bit better in fundamental soundness here than against Northwestern or Purdue, but I have to hedge here. That's what predictions are. You're hedging different outcomes. There's the outcome here where Michigan wins by 50, like they did in 2021. That could happen. There's the outcome where Maryland wins by 10. They're leading in the game, they control it, Michigan can't get off the mat, and they maybe get a pick six to seal it and win by 10. I think the average median outcome here is Michigan winning by a little less than 2 full touchdowns, and therefore Maryland will cover that 13.5 point spread. Not exactly confident in that, though. As this pertains to Big Ten standings, Maryland, even if they win out, is not going to finish in the top half of Big Ten standings. For Michigan, a lot's in front of them. A college football playoff berth, not really a trip to Indy, but as I discussed at the beginning, that's a good thing. If Michigan beats Ohio State, I can promise you that due to matchups, Indiana beating you before, so they know what it's like to win, and the fact that they're not a rival, so they don't have that weird mental thing, and it's indoors, it's in a track meet, it's not in Ann Arbor. If you beat Ohio State and then face Indiana, Indiana will blow you out. That will not be a close game, especially since Indiana will be healthier, they'll be more rested, and they'll want to put on a show, regardless of who they play in the Big Ten championship game. It would be a similar prediction of mine if Ohio State were to rematch Michigan and Indy after losing. I'd pick Ohio State to win that game. Indoors, not on the road. It probably would be a majority Buckeye fans. It's hard to beat a good team twice. Michigan as a team is not good enough to put 2 great efforts back to back, especially when the first would result in a very emotional sensation, very emotional feelings in Ann Arbor. So I think it is to Michigan's benefit that even if they went out and beat Ohio State, they likely will not get to Indianapolis. I think that is to Michigan's benefit. That is my Michigan-Maryland preview and prediction. All the more I got to say about this game is Michigan should win. I think Michigan will win. I think they'll control it. But as friend of the channel, DJ Every Day, or DG Every Day, forget exactly what his Twitter handle says, Michigan has no business being a double-digit favorite over any Power 4 team. And I forget if he added this or not, but I will add it, with the caveat of being on the road. Michigan doesn't really have any business being that large of a favorite over a P4 team on the road, unless that team is Oklahoma State. Or you could even say maybe Purdue. And they played Purdue at home and could have lost that game. So Michigan wins, but I do think Maryland covers. Now we can talk about Nebraska, Penn State, but before then, I feel much better, guys. So thank you for your support. I feel way better about this, but I do have to go to the bathroom and someone's trying to call me. So I'm going to take care of those 2 things at once, but we'll be right back. All right, Nebraska Penn State up next, and this is a game I'm pumped for because, yeah, I'm pumped for it because Nebraska and Penn State are some of my favorite programs to talk about. I hyped both up entering this year, especially Penn State. Penn State fell flat on its face. Nebraska, not really. Nebraska, if they went out and go 9-3, was a win removed from my final record prediction of 10-2, which I shouldn't. Just trying to adjust my seat here. Shouldn't have predicted them to go 10-2, but Penn State playing Nebraska coming off a bye. This is going to be a tough game for both these teams. Little bit shocked at the early line that Penn State is favored by 9.5, and I imagine this line will keep growing based on what I'm seeing, but we'll see. We'll see about that. The Nebraska Cornhuskers travel to Happy Valley to play the Penn State Nittany Lions, who are fighting for bowl eligibility at 4-6, 1-6 in Big Ten play. Nebraska's already earned bowl eligibility at 7-3, 4-3 in Big Ten Conference play. Nonetheless, despite having 3 additional wins and coming off a bye, which means they'll be more rested than Penn State, Nebraska is a 9.5-point underdog here. It'll be a 7 p.m. Eastern Time kickoff on NBC. 49 degrees, cloudy. I imagine Penn State, after earning a win and still having pride in their program, will probably pack the stands. So this is going to be an interesting game, and one, honestly, that I'm pretty excited for. Let's take a look at Nebraska's schedule to kick this off. Their most impressive win of the year is, I would say, from a power rating standpoint, Cincinnati, pretty easily. From a response standpoint, it would be UCLA. Beating them in the fashion they did with TJ Lateef in his first start was very impressive. This team has already improved from last year's from a power ratings angle, from a wins over expected standpoint, because I think this schedule, you don't have Ohio State and IU on the schedule as you did last year, but your non-con slate was certainly easier, and you didn't have the big QB injury you had. Otherwise, you'd probably be 8-2 and still in the playoff conversation. So, by all estimations, from my perspective, rules improved linearly every year. It's why you should be excited about Nebraska. That UCLA game showed that even if Nebraska somehow loses out here, there is hope, there is fight, there is a developmental process going on here that is beneficial to Nebraska, and Rule is the right guy moving forward. I also hate, by the way, that Nebraska, so a lot of national media types just started falling in love with them this year. They're playing a big game here, guys. I know Penn State's 4-6, but did you see what they did to Indiana? Did you see Ohio State kicked their rear, but did you see they were nearly tied with the Buckeyes at half? They could have won that game against Iowa. Did you see what they did to Michigan State from a net success rate margin standpoint? Did you see what they did to Oregon? This team is talented. This is a barometer game, not from a will this work angle. That was the UCLA game. Nebraska passed that test. But this is a measurement game, a temperature check for Nebraska from a roster angle. What is your roster and what are its weaknesses? Because Penn State is talented enough to where they will find them and exploit them if you have weaknesses that they can exploit. Some teams had them and they couldn't exploit them, or they only could exploit them due to those teams being down. Nebraska's not one of those teams because they aren't Oregon, Indiana, or Ohio State. They're Nebraska. That's part of the reason why Penn State's a favorite here. So people need to be paying attention to this game. This is a game that I think will determine a lot of moves that are made in the transfer portal for the Cornhuskers, because Penn State is solid at lines of scrimmage. They're great in pass rush. They've evolved there on defense, and they have enough talent at wide receiver, quarterback, and DB to give Nebraska issues. And Nebraska is one of the best special teams units in America. Credit to Mike Eckler. Shout out to him. Justin Lustig at Penn State has the #1 special teams unit per ESPN's efficiency. So this could be a special teams battle too. A lot of opportunities to assess Nebraska. And for Penn State, you could assess where some of these players will be next year based on how they play. If they play well enough and they decide to transfer, that'll boost their stock. This could also assess part of Penn State's roster next year, depending on how many of their players they can keep. And also, if you're a fan of specific Penn State players, whether you're a Penn State fan who wants to see these guys succeed in the NFL or fight for program pride, you want Terry Smith to stay on staff, and the more he wins, that shows that he's valuable to the culture and can hold things together. There's opportunity for Penn State here too. They're fighting for a bowl game. They're fighting for program pride. And Terry Smith, I think, is fighting to get a chance to be on Penn State's staff next year, which, crystal ball, I think he will be due to his development at corner, his ability to recruit. And I think he's already shown in his brief tenure as an interim coach to take more responsibility and to be a better leader than Franklin was. Don't think he'd say that publicly, and I think Franklin was a great guy in a variety of different ways. From an accountability and leadership standpoint, there's no coincidence that the minute Franklin took accountability after that Oregon game, the team collapsed. Just did. He did not take accountability early enough, didn't fix things early enough, and it all blew up. For Terry Smith, I think accountability is a big part of what he's instituted here. It's why they were able to play Indiana close. It's why they were able to compete with Iowa. It's why they were able to throw the football downfield finally against Michigan State and really, outside of that one big run play, dominate that game. So Penn State's fighting for some things here too. And speaking of what these teams are fighting for, let's check out some of the matchups between these teams and also some players who you should be paying attention to here. So with Nebraska, they are a team that is above average in the Power 4. They're an above average good Big Ten team. A lot to be desired from, but they've improved quite a bit from where they were last year in some areas. Definitely from where they were 2 years ago. And they are so far ahead of where they were under Scott Frost. For Penn State, they still have a good rushing attack, a good offensive line, a defensive line that's competent. Their weaknesses have a lot more to do with skill position play. Quarterback, receiver, Nicholas Singleton's very much regressed. It's very sad watching how far Penn State has fallen from where they were last year and the year before that. I mean, Franklin, from 2022 to 2024, from a win-loss record, from an achievement angle, from a power rating angle, had his best 3-year stretch or close to his best 3-year stretch at Penn State. And it looked like things were trending in the right direction with how much they brought back this year and bringing in Jim Knowles and bringing in Stan Drayton. And it just didn't work. Did not work. Katron Allen is so close to hitting that all-time Penn State, rushing yards leader record. There's a chance he'll hit it in this game due to Nebraska's rushing defense. So pay attention to him. Guard Olivavega Ione, tackle Nolan Rucci, tackle Drew Shelton, center Nick Dawkins, guard Anthony Dunco. That's their offensive line. Pay attention to Devontae Ross, who's been their best receiver, to Dennis Sutton, who's been their best pass rusher and defensive end, to Zane Durant, who's still playing hard at D tackle, and safeties Zakie Wheatley and King Mack, who've been the strength of the secondary. For Nebraska, TJ Lateef at quarterback. He's the star of the show, starting quarterback. It's going to be his second start off the bye. I imagine he'll probably be asked to do more in this game than against UCLA, and he'll probably be more capable to do so with extra planning. Look at running back Emmett Johnson, who has a chance against a Penn State rushing defense that also is not amazing. Not as bad as Nebraska's, but actually close. He could easily pass 1,500 all-purpose yards here. He's already passed 1,400, and he could get multiple touchdowns. And let's look out for Dane Keene, Isaiah Hunter, and Ja'Cory Barney Jr. at receiver. For Nebraska, it's all about their secondary on defense. Deshaun Singleton, Andrew Marshall, Sear Wright. Be paying attention to them. As for the quarterbacks, this is tough because the sample size is so small. Grunkemeyer is ahead of Latif in QBR, which I actually agree with. Grunkmeyer's had to play far tougher opponents, like Iowa. Okay, Iowa, Ohio State, Indiana. That is one of the toughest 3-game stretches in terms of facing defense, like, possible. Even tougher than some of Wisconsin's series in a row, where they had to play, Michigan, Ohio State, and Oregon in a row defensively. Not nearly as, not like close, but not as tough, regardless. You could probably put together some combinations that might be tougher, like, say, a team played Ohio State and Indiana somehow, and then had to play Texas Tech's defense. That probably would be the toughest combination, but we'll have to wait until the end of the year to really figure that out. Grunkmeyer's played some tough defenses and has been able to make some good throws, make some good decisions, and maneuver in the pocket. He has more experience to this point than Latif does. Latif's completed more passes, but I would argue Latif has better weapons. Latif has been playing in easier games, and the sample size is smaller. I mean, look at his passer rating versus QBR. That's a big indicator of playing in garbage time versus not, or, he had a pretty bad game in some of those drives against USC where he just had to be thrown in there. I don't know who's better between the two. My gut and brain say Grunkmeyer, but Latif's sample size is so small where maybe when he is prepared and has some chemistry with the ones, he is a really impressive quarterback, and he made some great throws against UCLA. So I'm indifferent here. I do not know who's better at quarterback, and it may not be a factor in this game, but what I will say is if one of these teams has the dramatically better quarterback, and there's a good chance of that being the case with the small sample size of these teams and the fact they've played dramatically different defenses and kind of just got thrown in there, whoever has that should win, as these teams are close enough in those areas. Some keys to this game: quarterback poise. So which quarterback is more poised? Not who's more talented, but who's just more poised, who's better in the pocket, who doesn't panic under pressure. Speaking of pressure, pass protection. Who protects their quarterback better? Run defense. Nebraska is 126th in run defense. Penn State 76th in terms of expected points allowed per attempt. So they let their opponents get explosives, score rushing touchdowns in the end zone. You get the point. Which makes tackling that much more important to limit the big plays, especially since Katron Allen, Nicholas Singleton, Emmett Johnson, these are running backs that can make big plays. And then, last but not least, special teams. These are both some of the best special teams units in America. With how evenly matched some of these teams are at different positions, this game could come down to who makes a long field goal, to who pins their opponents inside the 20 in a more efficient rate. Maybe one team pins their opponents on average inside the 20, the other inside the 10, who wins the field position battle. We'll see. There's a lot at stake here, and this is going to be an exciting night game and a good way to close out Saturday, entering a critical rivalry week for Nebraska. And if Penn State wins, big if, potentially searching bowl eligibility against Rutgers in the final week of the regular season. As for the matchups here, I do think Nebraska's the better staff. The overall teams are mostly equal. If I had to lean one way, I think Penn State does have the better roster. Penn State's rushing offense should be able to take advantage of Nebraska's rushing defense very well. Nebraska, I'd lean towards doing something similar against Penn State's rushing defense, but not to the same degree. I do think that both passing defenses are going to have an edge here, but more so Nebraska's than Penn State's. It's honestly going to be a very even game and I think, close game. I don't think it will be a 2-score game, as the Vegas spread indicates. And this is another week where I kind of hope I'm wrong, where I think that Nebraska, for the storyline and for the fact that their season's not over and Penn State's is, that it's better for the Big Ten and it's better for college football. And it's also better for my channel because to this point, Like, sorry, but we have more Nebraska fans here than Penn State fans. Hopefully, we'll get a more equal representation of college football fans as we continue to explode on YouTube, which thank you all for making that possible. But I'm going to pick against Nebraska here. I think that Penn State does win this game, and Nebraska covers. And the reason I'm going with that is I think Penn State will be able to run the ball pretty often here. And I've seen time and time again with Nebraska, their secondary is great, but it's not elite. And I think if Penn State is able to run the way I think they can, they'll be able to play off that with the play action. I don't know if Latif will be able to do that to the same degree where, I mean, we saw Nebraska against UCLA. We also saw Ohio State against UCLA. Like, after that Indiana game where Aiden Fisher got that pick six, UCLA was just done. Like, I think the air has been let out of the balloon a little bit in LA. This is going to be a much tougher task than that game against UCLA. This is also, like, Penn State's at home here. Happy Valley will be a tough place to play, and it will be the toughest place Nebraska's had to play at since Ohio State last year. And some of the matchups in this game that I said favored Penn State in the preseason still apply here. So I will pick Penn State to win. Nebraska, though, will cover. And if I am wrong about this prediction, it won't be because Penn State wins in a blowout. It will be because Nebraska wins outright. That's my assessment here of Nebraska versus Penn State, and it's going to be a critical game for measuring where Nebraska's at from a roster position and how much energy is left in Penn State's tank. I will tell you, I do think there is some energy left in Penn State's tank, and as for Nebraska, I like their roster, but they're going to need to make some portal additions and return and retain certain key players and starters or two-deep players to be able to really make a leap next year. They are lacking in some key areas that Penn State just is not roster-wise, particularly at the lines of scrimmage. All right. Now, these games aren't as big, and I'm rubbing my eyes because, tired. Not hungry, but tired. Again, for everyone live right now, we will be going live Wednesday and Thursday. Going to try to hit that 10 a.m. Eastern time, start, and I think we will be able to, due to tomorrow being able to get ahead of things. We're going to be talking about a lot on Wednesday and Thursday, like a ton of stuff. Reasons why teams can win their games, looking at championship paths, beginning to talk about which teams I think can win it all, and why, and also giving some early previews for some games next week. Arkansas travels to Texas in a old Southwestern Conference rivalry game, now SEC rivalry game. Texas in a bit of a look-ahead spot. They're 7-3, 4-2 in SEC play. They know that their playoff hopes are on the line. And if they want to reach the playoffs, not only do they have to win this game, but more importantly, win the Lone Star Showdown against a undefeated Texas A&M team who will be coming to their place next Friday with an 11-0 record because they're beating Sanford. For Arkansas, they're 2-8, they're 0-6, but Bobby Petrino's played in some close games. He's done a better job coaching the team than Sam Pittman has, and a win here, that would do a number for maybe him getting the head coaching job, and he probably wants that. So Texas being a 9.5-point favorite, among other things, puts a lot at stake in this game. Let's check out Arkansas's schedule briefly. The Razorbacks started off 2-0. They've put on wonderful performance offensively, week over week over week. Auburn limited them really in that second half, and Arkansas got a pick six from an awful Jackson Arnold in that game, who was just not a P4 quarterback. Notre Dame shut them down in part because defensive improvements, but also I feel like Arkansas did quit in that game, and that's why Pittman got fired basically right after that matchup. They've done a lot of good things this year, but their defense is non-existent, and Taylon Green is not an NFL quarterback, so sometimes their offense can and will sputter and suffer from inconsistencies. It's not all that dissimilar from Texas offensively. The difference is Texas actually has a great defense, and they're more talented than Arkansas at just about every position outside of Definitely offensive line, maybe running back, maybe quarterback. I do think Manning is more gifted than Talon Green, but Green this year has been better than Manning has. Manning has been Mr. Up and Down all season long. All the talent in the world, but also one of the lower floors amongst uber talented quarterbacks like himself. They're reeling from a 10-35 loss to Texas, where Georgia, or a 10-35 loss to Georgia, my apologies, where they never really had control of the game. Georgia was able to pass the ball on them pretty much all night. Texas did their job holding Georgia at the point of attack and stopping them from really running the ball outside of a few drives, but Kirby Smart outsmarted and outcoached and beat Steve Sarkisian and kind of punked him a little bit in that fourth quarter. So with 3 losses and a 4-2 SEC record, these next 2 games are must-wins, but how much can you get up for Arkansas with this letdown spot while also getting up for a tough A&M team who is going to present some challenges? I don't exactly know the answer to that, but let's try to deduce that, because that's going to play a part as to who wins this game and who emerges defeated. For Arkansas, I would pay close attention to Talon Green at quarterback, Mike Washington Jr. at running back, and Omega Blake at wide receiver. Defensively, it's all about their defensive line. Ian Jefferard, Quincy Rhodes Jr. on the D-line, and then cornerback Julian Neal. For Texas, it's Arch Manning, running back Contravion Wisner, tackle Trevor Gooseby, guard DJ Campbell, receivers Ryan Wingo and DeAndre Moore Jr. And then defensively, Hero Kanu, Colt Brevard, Colin Simmons, Ethan Burke on that D-line, linebacker Anthony Hill Jr., safety Michael Taft, cornerback Malik Muhammad, and their kicker, Mason Shipley. He's been one of the best kickers in college football. So those are some players to pay attention to in this matchup. Texas is strong on defense, inconsistent on offense. Arkansas is strong on offense and absolutely wet dog defensively. This is why I think that Texas wins, but I also believe that Arkansas covers. A big part of this is actually quarterback. So Arch Manning has been able to perform at a high level against bad defenses, Arkansas being one of them. Talon Green has not had the greatest performances against good defenses. Think LSU, think Auburn, think Notre Dame. Texas has a defense that is better than Notre Dame's. I don't know if it's better than Auburn's. I actually would say it's not after some recent performances. But it is about at LSU's caliber, and it's definitely better than Notre Dame's. And Texas can match Arkansas at size at the line of scrimmage. They're better at a variety of positions. And Green isn't as safe with the football as Arch Manning is. And Green also doesn't have a defense to take pressure off of him. So Texas, I expect, will control this game. If I'm wrong here, it will be because Texas somehow can't run the football and Manning is just really having a super inaccurate day as he did against UTEP, for example, or Kentucky. And that's combined with Arkansas somehow being one of the few teams to ever run on a Pete Kwiatkowski defense, on top of Talon Green hitting a few explosives, which you can get against that Texas secondary. Rushing offense, quarterback accuracy, the get-up factor. Has Arkansas quit? Is Texas looking ahead to A&M? Is Texas potentially maybe going to quit? Not for the whole game. I think their culture is too strong, but maybe initially they come out very sloppy and sleepy. Arkansas's passing offense. So is Talon Green accurate? Do his receivers get open against a solid Texas secondary? And as for Texas's pass defense, does it improve? Because it's had a really sketchy few games now. They are an average pass defense in terms of EPA allowed per attempt at 62nd. But I just think too much goes in Texas's favor. Their offense should eat Arkansas's defense alive. I do think Arkansas's offense will perform well enough to make this game close. But much like how Texas never had the ball with a chance to take the lead, they scored 10, then Georgia immediately responded, so they never had the ball with a chance to take the lead. I kind of think that's how this game will go, where Texas isn't going to cover, and it will be a 7-point win or less than that, but Arkansas will only have the ball to make it a one-score game, not to take the lead, if you get what I'm saying. So with that, I do believe that the Longhorns are going to win. They're going to earn their 8th win with a chance to earn their 9th win over their rival, their hated arch rival. I have a great friend of the show who just is very open. He's objective about it too, but he's very open about the fact that he loathes A&M as a Texas guy. I'm very excited to see how those rivals meet up for now the second consecutive year in a row and second consecutive year of this rivalry being in the SEC. It's going to be an awesome game. Even if Texas loses this one, thankfully, if you're a Longhorn fan, I don't think you'll lose this one. And as for Arkansas, I don't know about your future. I am very confident saying, though, that it is not Bobby Petrino being your next head coach. No way. If you want to be a serious program, you will not make that hire. Speaking of a serious program, Oklahoma hosting Missouri in a must-win spot where their playoff hopes, I think, are pretty secure, are pretty safe and sound for now, but with how they play, with their defense leading and Mateer in the offense basically are playing the part of the clerk at the grocery store where they're on mop-up duty. They do just enough and they make it look nice, and they do a lot of key critical things. They're undervalued as service workers and retail workers often are. However, they're not the main piece of the pie, and they're not the biggest reason why the operation is running at the same time. Both things can be true. That is the case here with Oklahoma and their offense and their defense. And what happens when your CEO and your manager and your hardest worker are all on defense and not on offense is that sometimes you can get in a position where, things go well and the whole operation, the whole grocery store is doing well, everyone's doing their job, but sometimes you just have a bad day because when you're leading with defense, the margin of error is just smaller. And that's what I worry about with Oklahoma in these final two games, is they could perform well, much like Alabama in theory did against them. But the margin of error being so small against Missouri and LSU teams that have good defense and just enough offense to put something together and maybe emerge with a close win. That's why I think Oklahoma's only favored by 8.5 points here, even though healthy, and they are getting healthier, and Missouri is not. They're still only 8.5 point favorites and not double-digit favorites. Let's look at Missouri's schedule here. So, for the Tigers, not a lot of impressive wins, not a lot of impressive performances. Getting blown out by A&M, losing to Vanderbilt. That close game against Alabama was impressive, but their most impressive performances have been losses this year. And they're not healthy. Matt Zollers is their starting quarterback. Things have really slowed down after a performance against Alabama that had some, including myself, thinking that they would compete for the college football playoff, and maybe even after that loss, an SEC championship because of how well they played and how they competed. They have a chance to lose out here. They also, realistically, do have a chance to win out given the style of play of both the Sooners and the Razorbacks. I almost said the Hogs there, and I think that would have been funnier to say, but I wanted to get that terminology correct. For the Sooners, impressive win over Michigan, impressive win at the time over Auburn, impressive wins over Alabama, Tennessee, and South Carolina, all on the road. Too bad they couldn't beat Ole Miss, otherwise this team could be staring down the barrel of 11-1 and definitely hosting a playoff game. The good news for Oklahoma is I think you miss the playoffs or you host a playoff game, which means your chances at winning 10 games is very much maximized. Like a 9-3 OU will probably be a matchup nightmare since I imagine Mateer returns for any team they play in a bowl game. You get 10 wins. If you win out, you already are guaranteed 10 wins, and you might even get an 11th or even 12th, depending on how your playoff bracket looks. Oklahoma, when healthy, can be that good. So everything's in front of them. And it's been an amazing job by Brent Venables. I got criticized in my reaction saying that they had a program win over Alabama. Don't get that mistaken. It was. Because with the way Oklahoma's been recruiting under Venables, with the way some of their seasons have looked, and how some of the injuries and the handlings of the staff have looked for the Sooners, it was not always a good look. Winning that game shows that Oklahoma can perform at the same level as they historically have in this new, tougher SEC conference. That was not a guarantee. It's still not a guarantee. But at least we know that maybe, just maybe, it can be done. Even with all the changes, even with all the upheaval, with Riley leaving and that roster being put in tatters when he left, everything's in front of Oklahoma. This is just such a huge, wonderful season for them. And it makes college football better that one of college football's premier blue bloods, after a few years of inconsistency, is looking like it's starting to wake back up. For matchups and key players to pay attention to, I'm looking at, for Missouri, Ahmad Hardy, wide receiver Kevin Coleman Jr., tackle Keegan Trost, and then their defensive line with Zion Young, Damon Wilson, and Chris McClellan. Also for Oklahoma, R. Mason Thomas, David Stone, pay attention to them on the D-line, and then linebacker Kip Lewis, safety Peyton Bowen, defensive back Eli Bowen. For Oklahoma, John Mateer at quarterback, wide receiver Isaiah Satenya III and Deion Burks, and tackle Michael Fasusi. Oklahoma is inside the top 10 in points allowed per play. They're actually outside of the top 20 in yards allowed per play, but that's due to Ole Miss, that's due to Texas, that's due to Tennessee. They've had a very tough schedule, among some of the nation's toughest. They're actually outside the top 20 in yards allowed per pass attempt. It's not yards allowed per play. They are first in yards allowed per rushing attempt, allowing only 2.3. I mean, this front, and I saw it in that Michigan game where they played, in that Auburn game to a lesser degree, and then I saw it against Tennessee, against Ole Miss. I mean, their run defense and their defense just in general with Venables coordinating it is incredible. It's the stuff of legends. So Oklahoma is favored here. They are the better team. I also think they have the better quarterback. Zollers is unproven. He's been pretty poor in his performances. Mateer has not played to the expectation that many did. I was actually disappointed a little bit that I didn't completely come off of it, but I did a little bit, and I was disappointed that I didn't hold my ground more. Preseason, I thought that Mateer was just going to be an above-average QB, and that's totally right. Early on, it looked like maybe against Michigan, he'd be pretty freaking good, but he's just good and above average and has moxie and is gutty. But he's not a great passer, and overall, he's not a great quarterback. He won't lose you games, as Arnold did, but he's about to Oklahoma what I think Dylan Gabriel was, and from a passing angle, he's worse. He's just good enough to keep offenses honest, to play within the system, to also play outside of the system, off script, and make things happen. It's like the analogy I made earlier in the video. The stalker and the grocery store clerk that, makes sure everything is clean, looks nice. He's important. He's underrated. And at the same time, there is a reason he makes the wage he does, and the guy that has to keep tabs on 10 of that worker does what he does and has the job that he does. It's not that one inherently is more valuable. I know I'm getting beyond football here, but it's not that one person is inherently better or worth more than the other, but their position and the impact they have is. You can compartmentalize and separate out those two things. It's not insulting to say that Mateer isn't an elite QB. The numbers, the data, his film just say that. The defense is why Oklahoma is here. Literally. If not for that pick six, Oklahoma doesn't beat Alabama. That was a great play by Oklahoma's defense. And the turnovers they forced, the pressure they got, that was an amazing performance by Venables in that defensive unit. This gets me to my roster matchups where I think Oklahoma's the better overall team. I love Drinkwitz as a coach, but Oklahoma, after that injury to Pribula and as the season's gone on, has revealed themselves to have offensive issues themselves. They're playing on the road. This is a game Oklahoma nearly won last year. It's a classic revenge spot. I do like Oklahoma to win and cover. I think this game will be like a 20-9 type game where Oklahoma will lead and dominate, but because of how the offenses get limited by both defenses, it will be closer on the scoreboard than the actual game was. So the game will be much more of a dominant performance by one side than the final score indicates, and I think Oklahoma will be that dominant player. It will not be close enough on the scoreboard, though, for Missouri to cover. Love the Sooners here, and honestly, I love them to also beat LSU, win out, and reach the college football playoff. Now we can talk about a few more games here. Okay. We've been live for 2 hours. We have been. We've been live for 2 hours. So I'm actually just going to call it quits here. It's already been a pretty mediocre show. It just has been. So I'm just going to call it here and release these clips. And the rest of the clips will be out in video form tomorrow. So, yeah, we're gonna call it quits here. It's already been a rough night. Don't need to try and make it different. It's like you take the L on the head, as the good teams do when they do get outplayed, and you just move on and look for bigger and better things. We'll have a much better show Wednesday and Thursday. I really thank you guys all for coming on here and watching this and supporting this channel. There will be content out tonight from this stream. We won't be live tomorrow, but those segments we didn't get to, those will be out tomorrow. And there will also maybe be some additional clips out too. Just maybe, though. No promises. The only thing I can promise is that we will be live Wednesday and Thursday. And I will promise those will be at 10 a.m. So be there.